This is a lecture from OpenTuition.
You will find on the Advanced Audit and Assurance part of the OpenTuition site a document called Advanced Audit and Assurance, How to Tackle the Exam. It's worthwhile for you to read this document before listening to this lecture. This lecture basically talks you through the important parts of the document, but some initial reading is useful. We'll also be using as an example the September 2018 exam, in particular the case study, and you can download that from the ACCA site, and we would very much advise you to have a copy of that exam available as we go through this lecture. So what approach are we looking at here? Well, first of all, the format of the exam. There is the case study, 50%, 50 marks, and then two 25-mark questions. The ACCA syllabus specifically says that the case study is set at the planning stage. So perhaps it's looking at risks and how you're going to respond to that. Perhaps it's looking at ethical considerations and indeed whether or not it's safe for you to proceed with the audit and the like. It can be dealing with a single company, a group of companies, or potentially several audit clients. So you could be presented maybe with situations or a question dealing with 3 audit clients, all with their own set of problems at the planning stage. Time allocation is absolutely vital in this exam. If you were, for example, to leave out one of the smaller questions, your maximum possible marks is going to be 75%. And if you're going to hit 50% of the total exam, then you have to be getting, in a way, 66, 67% of the available marks from your 75. And it's very difficult to do that. It's very unusual for people who omit questions or substantial parts of questions to pass the exam. So time allocation is vital. There's a certain leeway in time allocation because, of course, questions do vary in their complexity. But what I want you to look at in particular here is the amount of time that we have suggested for question 1, the 50-mark case question. It is certainly more than 50% of the planning time we have suggested for questions 2 and 3. In other words, the reading and planning time for question 1 is not proportionate. And this is because if you have a short question, to some extent reading it once, you're going to retain a lot of the information and you may often be able to plan immediately. But if you have a very long question with lots of information given to you, then reading it once, you're going to be unable to retain that information, to sort it, to make sense of it. You're going to have to read the information several times, and therefore the reading and planning time escalates substantially. But it is very important, about half an hour for reading and planning on question 1. This will seem an age to you in the exam. But remember, when you're reading and planning, this is not dead time. You are getting to know that question and to think about it and to plan the answer. Then when you come to write the answer, things will go pretty quickly. And it'll be a much better answer because you've planned it, it's going to flow. It is going to be worthy of the 4 professional marks that are available for the case question. Remember, once you've hit, let's say for question 1, around 105 minutes maximum, 100 minutes or thereabouts, that's a combined reading, planning and writing time. Once you've reached that limit, stop. If you keep going on for another 5, 10, 15 minutes, then you're eating into the valuable time that you should be using to address questions 2 and 3. And if you begin skimping on those, you're going to find it very hard to get enough marks to pass. Know the layout, particularly of the case question. There is an introductory paragraph, which we'll be looking at in a moment. And then it refers to exhibits. Exhibit 1 here is really going to hold detailed requirements. Of course, it says down here, the requirement respond to the email, but the email or the other instructions, the memo, whatever it's going to be, the record maybe of a telephone conversation with the partner, this is going to set out the specific requirements really of the question. And then there are other exhibits. Exhibits hold detailed information and so on here, and the given titles. So background information about the group, extracts from the group financial statements, management's determination or calculation really of the goodwill, an extract from the group strategy document prepared by Vulture Associates, we'll see it's another auditing company, relating to links. So they're pretty well signposted. And later on, what we have to do is to match up the exhibits with the requirements. And very often there's nearly a one-to-one relationship. Maybe Exhibit 2 deals with the first requirement of the email, and so on. Sometimes it might be slightly more complicated, and you have to just watch that. And one of the things we'll have to do is also to make sure we make use of all the exhibits. The examiner is not going to give you an exhibit and then expect you to ignore it. There's 46 marks for the writing of the answer, if you like, and then there are 4 professional marks for the presentation and logical flow of the briefing notes or whatever the requirement is of that particular question. You don't need to allocate time for the professional marks. If you've properly planned your answer and are answering it properly, the professional marks should kind of automatically emerge just from the quality of your writing and answer. Read the first paragraph, introducing the case. Here you are a manager of the audit department. You're responsible for the audit of Eagle Group. It has a financial year ended 31st of December. Your firm is auditing the parent company of Eagle Company and all its subsidiaries except Links, a newly acquired subsidiary located in a foreign country, audited by a local firm of auditors. Now that simple paragraph holds a wealth of information that you need to take into account. First of all, we're dealing with a group. And of course, once you're dealing with a group and potentially group financial statements, the whole complexity of the audit rises. You need special information, for example, to come from the components. You have to consider what is the appropriate treatment of the component. Is it full consolidation or is it kind of equity accounting and the like? The year end is the 31st of December. And it's important to take note of the year end, and if you're given information, also note what date we're currently supposed to be at. So if we were appointed auditors on the 15th of December 2008, then we're being appointed very late in the game, and we're going to be on a lot of kind of time pressure perhaps to do the audit. We've maybe missed an awful lot of opportunities for testing internal controls and so on during earlier parts of the year. We're auditing the parent company and all its subsidiaries except Links. And you know, if there's a component in a group which you're not auditing, again, the problems arise because you have this problem. What's the quality of the audit? How am I going to get the special information I need for the consolidation process, and so on? So that's a problem in this one here. It's newly acquired, and newly acquired implies it's the first year we've been dealing with this component, and always the first year you're dealing with a company gives higher audit risk because we know less about it. It's been acquired in the year, so this is the first year of a goodwill calculation. When during the year was it acquired? Do we have to apportion a profits and links for the purposes of consolidation? It's in a foreign country, so there may be risks or problems involved in translating the financial statements into our home currency. It's a local firm of auditors, and we probably know nothing about them. We don't know what their ethical professional standards might be, yet we're having to make use of their work if we have to make our opinions over the group financial statements. So within that 4 lines, really, we have a huge amount of potential relevance, if you like, and potential problems in this audit. And it's really important that we pick up these pieces of information. Then we're going to read the requirements of Exhibit 1. Here is Exhibit 1. We see there are 4 requirements. The marks go 24, 6, 10, 6. This adds up to 46. There's another 4 marks that we needn't particularly worry about. On the professional marks, these, as I say, should emerge automatically. And we should be planning our time on these. So, again, I would point out, and this kind of timing is within this document that you can see. Again, I would point out that the time is not proportional. So, between B and A here, there's 4 times the marks, but there's not really exactly 4 times the amount of time we need to devote to it. Again, dealing with a long part of a question, 24 marks, about an hour's worth of writing, is more difficult, if you like, than dealing with something which has only got 6 marks, which doesn't need nearly as much planning to think, what order am I going to put the paragraphs in, and so on. But planning, sub-planning, if you like, the time is important. And then we get on and we read this, and what we have to be looking for in this are addressing these requirements for this preparation of the briefing notes, and that, of course, itself is important. What is the format? Is it a letter? Is it briefing notes? Is it emails going back to the partner? Is it notes for a discussion? What can it be here? And we need to look at the verbs, because very often these parts are then kind of subdivided. So in part A, we have to evaluate the audit risks, and then we have to use analytical procedures. In part C, for example, here we have to use the information in Exhibit 5 and then discuss any implications. In part A, we have to, in here, after considering the request here, providing here, we have to discuss the ethical and professional implications, and we have to recommend further actions. Similarly, at part B, we have to design the audit procedures, but we do not have to do something else. Note that most of these have got 2, maybe 3 kind of sub-requirements in this. And if you simply, for example, indeed, discuss the ethical professional implications and you don't recommend further actions, you forget that bit, then you can think, well, maybe in part D, instead of getting 6 marks, I'm going to be at a maximum of 3. And that is a shame, because usually once you've done the first bit of the requirement, the second bit's easy. Once you have spotted and discussed the ethical professional implications, recommending further actions is pretty straightforward. Once you've evaluated audit risks, responding to those is relatively easy. And it's an absolute shame if you forget to, if you like, make the best use of your careful work by leaving out one of these requirements, which is identified by verbs in the question. what we have to do is to relate the exhibits to the requirements. Often the requirements will specifically state which exhibit you are to use. So if we look back in here, it says in this one here, shown in Exhibit 4. This one here, shown in Exhibit 5. This one here, shown in Exhibit 2. Exhibit 1 itself, this is basically Exhibit 1 we're looking at here. So we've dealt with Exhibit 1, we've dealt with Exhibit 2, and 4, and 5. What are we going to do with Exhibit 3? It's not specifically mentioned in these requirements. And Exhibit 3 is an exhibit which is basically looking at financials. And we have to think, well, where can we fit this in? We can't ignore it. The examiner is not going to give us an exhibit and then expect us to not use it. And the natural place, really, is to be thinking of analytical procedures. You need to look at the financials, make use of the financials, if you're going to be able to deal with the calculation of the analytical procedure ratios. Plan your answer. Note that if you're asked to evaluate something that is of a higher kind of level, then maybe recommending a procedure. Evaluation implies a judgment. Evaluation implies recognizing a problem and then saying whether it's, serious or not so serious, and so on. So we're looking maybe 2 to 3 marks for that part of it. Once you have maybe seen a risk, then usually recommending a procedure is much more straightforward, and that might be only 1 mark. Marks for calculations are restricted, so though we have to do analytical procedures, do sensible ones. Don't do every one that comes to mind. If you're using calculations to look at materiality, and that's important, then don't go through, the gross profit, lower and upper limits of 5 and 10% and so on here, the turnover 0.5 to 1%, the assets 1 to 2%. Don't necessarily calculate all 6 measures of materiality. These calculations are very straightforward. The kind of more basic auditing, we of course have to recognize whether something is material or not, but don't make a song and dance over the calculations. These are low skills part of the question, and you're not going to get a huge amount of marks for them. Draw up an answer plan. Think about how you're going to provide the information. For example, if you have a number of points to make, it might be sensible to make the key point, the most important point at the start, and then the less important points further on. It's logical to do that, but also it makes sure that you set out in full the most important point, and if you are pressed for time, the one to maybe skimp on is how much you write about the trivial point. Tick off or account for exhibits, make sure you use them all. Organize your plan points into some logical type of order, and then just look at it. Take 30 seconds, look at your answer plan, and think, does that look sensible? Is it logical? Maybe look back at the requirements. Have I identified, evaluated, and suggested the responses to that? Have I covered all of those verbs in my answer plan? Then finally, write the answer. Professional marks for presentation, decent use of language, logical flow of the notes, clarity of explanation, and so on. Use of proper professional language will be in there. It's useful to put headings. It's certainly useful for the marker if you put headings, so that you tell the marker, this is this is what I'm dealing with here. Sentence structure, not too long, I would suggest. A number of relatively short sentences is much better than a huge rambling paragraph there. good standard of English, avoid repetition, avoid digression, focus on the requirements, not other interesting but random topics that come to mind, and seek to add value. Your answer should have moved forward the information's in the question. It should do much more than just repeat the information in the question. So we're looking here, the question may set out audit, or have embedded within it audit risks. What you have to do is to identify audit risk and evaluate. That's moving forward. This is a serious audit risk. And then maybe saying, well, how are we going to respond to that? That's moving it forward again. Much more than just stating the bold audit risk and saying, here it is, but without giving any sort of guidance as to its importance or how we should respond.